I still remember the first time I saw the listing for the Lakehouse. It was a crisp Thursday morning in late April, and I was scrolling through property websites while sipping my third cup of coffee. My fingers paused on the photos of a weathered cabin perched on the edge of Mirror Lake. The water looked impossibly clear, reflecting the tall pines and the early morning mist. My heart raced. This was it.my dad had blocked me from the family trip to Mirror Lake last year. He said I was too busy with my new marketing job in Seattle, that I needed to focus on skyrocketing my career before indulging in lazy vacations. His voice still echoes in my head when I think of standing on the dock without him ever packing my bags. I felt a mix of anger and hurt that drove me to prove something, anything, to him. By the time I logged into my online banking app, I'd made a decision. I would buy that Lakehouse. Not to spite him, exactly, but because it called to me in ways I couldn't ignore. I had saved aggressively since graduating college, stashing away bonuses and side gig earnings in a high-yield account. It was enough. Almost enough. The asking price was steep for a 25-year-old living alone in a cramped studio, but I saw potential. That afternoon, I called my best friend and roommate, Emma. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright and yawning. I blurted out the whole story about the listing and my dad's veto on last summer's trip. She laughed, then got quiet. I knew what she was thinking. It was reckless. It was absurd. And yet when she finally said yes, her excitement matched mine in that moment of shared insanity. I contacted the listing agent, a man named Carl who sounded like he'd spent his entire life in Spokane. His voice was calm and measured, reassuring me that the property had been on the market for months. He agreed to an in-person showing over Memorial Day weekend. I booked a Flixbus ticket, 2 seats just in case Emma changed her mind. I arranged a day off from work, using the excuse of a dentist appointment. I couldn't risk suspicion. On the morning of the trip, Emma and I boarded the bus at dawn. The sun was just rising over the Olympic Mountains, painting the sky in pastel washes of pink and gold. I held my breath at every mile marker that suggested closer proximity to the lake. I thought about Dad's stern lectures on financial responsibility, about the heirloom watch he'd given me for my 21st birthday, now sitting untouched in my dresser. This purchase felt like a tipping point in my life. When we arrived, the air smelled of pine resin and damp earth. The lake itself was still, like a vast sheet of glass. The cabin sat slightly elevated above the waterline, its gray wood siding streaked with age. A single wooden dock stretched out into the water. I nearly cried. Carl handed me the keys with a professional smile. For a moment, everything else faded, the bus ride, my cubicle at the ad agency, even Dad's angry refusal. All that mattered was this place inside. The cabin was small but sturdy. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, flanked by 2 worn leather armchairs. The hardwood floors creaked underfoot. The kitchen was compact, its original tongue-and groove cabinets painted robin's egg blue. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, dancing on the surface of the old oak table. I could already see myself roasting marshmallows in the hearth, sipping hot cider on cold nights, writing blog posts about life by the water. I ran my fingers along the windowsill, taking in the faint scent of cedar and mildew. Emma explored the small bedroom upstairs, calling out that the view from the loft was incredible. I climbed the narrow stairs and stood at the window, staring out at the expanse of the lake. My pulse pounded. This wasn't just a purchase, it was a declaration of independence. I felt both liberated and terrified. That afternoon, over sodas and chips on the dock, I made an offer. I had my laptop open, documents ready, heart thudding like a drum. Emma held my hand when I hit send. The adrenaline rush was intoxicating. We sat in the fading light, our laughter echoing across the water. I imagined telling Dad that night, saw the surprise on his face, maybe even a hint of pride. I didn't dare dream of forgiveness, but hope flickered. Back on the bus the next day, I replayed the moment of clicking confirm. The landscape blurred. Outside the window, rolling farmland and clusters of evergreens. I felt like I was barreling toward a future completely my own. Emma leaned against me, half asleep, and I let myself relax for the first time in months. The weight of his disapproval lifted, replaced by the raw thrill of possibility. When the offer was accepted less than 24 hours later, my phone buzzed with an email from Carl. I read the words twice before I believed them. Congratulations, the sellers have accepted your offer. I let out a whoop that startled a fellow passenger. Emma high-fived me, and I cried a little, right therein. Aisle 9. By the time I called Dad, my voice shook. I told him I'd closed on the Lakehouse. I didn't mention the family trip or that his rejection was the spark. I simply said, I bought it. There was silence on the other end. Then he asked how much I paid. When I told him, I heard a long exhale. That was all. I wished him good night and hung up, my heart racing. And now, weeks later, I'm sitting at my desk in Seattle, staring at the framed photo of the cabin on my shelf. Every time I look at it, I feel a surge of pride. The closing date is set for 3 weeks from today. I've already planned trips, drafted renovation budgets, and started a blog to document the journey. I don't know if this Lakehouse will heal my relationship with Dad, but it's mine, in every sense that matters. Tomorrow I fly back to Mirror Lake to begin the work. Paint colors, furniture shopping, local contractors, so many details to manage. I keep replaying the moment I first stepped onto that dock, inhaled the scent of pine and water, and knew this was where I belonged. It wasn't just a real estate transaction. It was a rebellion, a reclamation, a leap toward the life I choose to build. As night falls over the city, I close my eyes and picture the lake under a sky full of stars, the cabin windows glowing warmly. In the darkness. I'm 25, a woman on her own, with a key in my hand and an entire horizon of possibilities before me. And though Dad might still be mad, I know I've already won something far more important. I drove into the gravel driveway before dawn, the sky painted in pale lavender and rose. The chill air carried the scent of pine and dew-damp earth, and I felt a thrill of anticipation sharpen with each step toward the cabin. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the familiar musty warmth wrapping around me like an old friend. My heart fluttered as I flicked on the overhead light above the kitchen sink, bright, utilitarian, no frills. I dropped my duffel bag on the oak floor and walked through each room, imagining the changes I planned. I traced the lines of faded wallpaper in the bathroom and measured the gap between the stove and the countertop, already picturing a retro mint green appliance there. This place was a blank canvas, and I was both artist and subject. After lugging my roller suitcase up the narrow stairs, I collapsed on the twin bed in the loft and closed my eyes. I could hear the soft ripple of wind through the pines outside the window and the occasional call of a loon drifting across the lake. My mind buzzed with contractor quotes and color swatches, but I forced myself to breathe deeply and just be present. I'd arrived alone, but I wasn't lonely. Emma would join me next week, and until then, I had this morning all to myself. I pictured her face when she saw the wood-burning stove I'd ordered, how her eyes would light up at the thought of hot cocoa by the fire. It was enough to keep the pang of exhaustion at bay. I brewed coffee on the tiny propane stove, 2 mugs, thick and steaming, and carried them out to the dock. The water was as still as glass, mirroring the sky above. I wrapped my hands around the mug's warmth and let the steam curl up to my nose. In Seattle, I'd chased deadlines and presentations. Here, the weight of expectations felt like a distant rumor. I sipped slowly, tasting the pine resin, the faint trace of firewood smoke. It grounded me in the moment, reminded me why I'd undertaken this crazy adventure. Buying a Lakehouse had been a declaration, but coming here now was where the real work, physical, emotional, architectural, would begin. By mid-morning, I met with Greg, the local contractor I'd found through a Facebook community group. He arrived in a mud-splattered pickup, lunch pail in hand and a friendly grin beneath his baseball cap. We toured the cabin, clipboard in hand, discussing structural repairs needed for the porch, the rod around the window sills, and the electrical panel that barely met code. Greg pointed out places where water seeped behind the paneling and where the foundation crumbled at the corner. Each issue felt like a betrayal at first glance, but as he outlined solutions, his confidence and expertise reassured me. I nodded along, asking questions about timelines and costs, determined to stay in control without micromanaging. After he left, I spent the afternoon clearing out debris, old newspapers, rotting firewood, mismatched kitchen utensils left behind by the previous owners. I sorted what I'd keep into neat piles, tools, vintage dishes, scrap lumber. My hands ached by the time I lugged the last box into the carport, but the sense of accomplishment was immediate. I paused to admire the cabin's silhouette against the afternoon sun, its wide windows glinting. The place may have been neglected for years, but it was salvageable, just like I felt I was, after a year of corporate grind and strained family ties. That evening, I drove into town for supplies, winding along a 2-lane road flanked by firs and maples. The hardware store bustled with locals picking up paint cans and plywood. The grocery had a glint-your-own honey station and fresh bakery bread that smelled divine. I chatted with the cashier, a woman who recognized me from my weekend visit. She asked about my plans, and I outlined my vision for open shelving in the kitchen and a pastel accent wall in the main room. Her eyes lit up and she offered tips on where to buy reclaimed wood for floating shelves. It felt good to be part of a community, even in this small way. Back at the cabin with groceries in tow, eggs, bacon, eggs again, because I loved breakfast. I lit the fireplace despite the mild weather. Watching the logs catch flame, I thought about Dad. I hadn't heard from him since I told him about the purchase. Part of me worried he was hurt or angry, that I'd crossed some line he couldn't forgive. But another part of me felt proud. I'd taken control of my life, of my story. I poured myself a glass of red wine and settled into one of the leather armchairs, letting the crackle of the fire fill the silence. I allowed myself to feel gratitude for this place, for the chance to build something real. Late that night, I sat at the oak table with my laptop open, drafting the first post for my blog, From Cubicle to Cabin, My Lakehouse Journey. I wrote about the thrill of finding the property, the sting of being blocked from a family trip, and the determination that led me here. I included photos of the cabin in its before state, peeling paint, warped floorboards, dusty windows. I ended with a promise: stay with me as I transform this forgotten cabin into a home filled with laughter, warmth, and community. When I hit publish, my hands trembled. In that moment, I wasn't just documenting renovations. I was staking my claim on the life I wanted. Sleep came fitfully, dreams of collapsing ceilings and snail-paced carpenters mingling with images of Dad's disappointed face. I woke at dawn again, resolved to tackle the painting today. With roller and tray in hand, I stood on the porch and gazed out at the lake. The morning mist still lingered on the surface, and I felt a deep, unnameable peace. I dipped the roller into the soft gray paint I'd chosen and began brushing the exterior siding. Each stroke was both literal and symbolic, covering old neglect. With fresh intent, marking my territory, writing my own narrative. At lunchtime, I called Emma. Her voice was bright with excitement as she counted down the days until she could arrive. "I can't wait to wield a paintbrush next to you," she said, and I realized how much I needed her presence to balance my fierce independence. We chatted about what furniture to bring, her grandmother's quilt, my mid-century couch. We planned a celebratory dinner at the little lakeside diner once the exterior was done. I closed the call feeling lighter, buoyed by the knowledge that I wasn't alone in this. By late afternoon, the cabin's exterior wore its new coat of gray like armor against the elements. I stood back and admired my handiwork, grass-stained jeans and paint-speckled shirt testament to the labor. The setting sun turned the lake to molten gold, illuminating the cabin's fresh face. I felt a surge of triumph, a sense that I was on the cusp of something transformative. I'd left behind the protective shell of corporate life and ventured into vulnerability, into uncertainty, in pursuit of authenticity. Here, on the edge of Mirror Lake, I was becoming someone I recognized more fully. When darkness fell and the stars emerged, I climbed the narrow stairs to the loft and lay on the twin bed, listening to the wind whisper through the trees. My body was exhausted, but my spirit soared. I closed my eyes and breathed in the cedar-scented air, holding on to the day's victories, the repaired porch board, the smooth sweep of paint, the community's quiet support. Tomorrow I'd tackle the interior renovation, and each day after that, until this place was truly my own. In the stillness, I felt a profound certainty that this journey, this reclamation of space, self, and story, was only beginning. Today I woke before sunrise and headed to the hardware shed behind the cabin to retrieve the mislaid spare batteries for the flashlight. The cold air nipped my cheeks as I fumbled in the dim light, but I found them tucked inside a chipped metal box. I hurried inside, really eager to paint the interior walls before breakfast. The main room looked so different, fresh gray siding glowing through the windows, and I felt a burst of excitement. I rolled up the linen curtains planned to dye navy, unrolled my drop cloth, and dipped my brush into the creamy white primer. Each stroke of the brush felt meditative, covering the aged wood paneling with a smooth coat of white. I paused occasionally to admire the transformation. The room looked brighter, more spacious. The air smelled of paint and fresh possibility. I imagined hosting friends for weekend retreats, playing acoustic guitar by the fireplace, curling up with a book on rainy afternoons. These daydreams buoyed me through the slow progress. By mid-morning I'd finished the first coat, cleaned my brushes in warm soapy water, and stepped back to survey my work. The cabin's interior felt more like a home and less like a project. Later that afternoon, I tackled the electrical issue I'd noted. The outdated fuse box needed replacement to pass code, and I wasn't entirely comfortable with rewiring. Greg arrived with an electrician friend named Pilar, who moved around the panel with confident ease. Pilar explained each step, and I watched as they removed old wiring and installed a modern breaker box. I felt grateful for their expertise and relieved to see the cabin's circuits brought into the 20th century. While they worked, I sorted through my design files on a tablet, planning furniture placement that would maximize light and traffic flow. The following day, I turned my attention to the bathroom. The tub's enamel finish was chipped, and the sink leaked at every turn. I scrubbed mold from the grout lines and recaulked around the faucets. Then I peeled up the vinyl flooring, revealing warped plywood beneath. I replaced damaged subflooring and installed peel-and-stick laminate planks that resembled weathered oak. As I swept away debris, I thought about how much this project mirrored my own life, peeling back old layers, repairing damage, and laying down stronger floors to stand on. This space, once neglected, felt ready to serve every sunrise and moonlit midnight. With structural repairs complete, I moved into the decorative phase. In the small upstairs loft, I hung string lights and spread a soft rug between the twin beds. I draped one bed with Emma's quilt and topped the other with a down duvet I'd ordered. That evening I sat by the window, pen in hand, drafting a heartfelt email to Dad. I wrote about my journey toward independence, my deep love for him, and my hope that he might visit this place one day. I hesitated before sending, vulnerability. Felt risky, but then I clicked send, heart pounding with both fear and relief. The next morning, I found his reply waiting. His words were cautious but warm. He praised the photos I'd shared and admitted he regretted keeping me from that trip. He wrote that he missed our time together and asked if he could visit in late summer. When I read it, tears sprang to my eyes. I realized this cabin was bigger than just a personal victory. It had become a bridge between us. I typed back immediately, welcoming him with open arms and suggesting dates. I leaned against the wall, phone pressed to my cheek, smiling at the thought of building new memories. Here, over the next week, I prepared for his arrival. I refinished the oak table in the main room and sanded down rough edges on the rocking chairs. I repainted the cabinet doors robin's egg blue to complement the white walls and replaced the lace curtains with crisp linen covers. In town, I discovered a weekend community potluck at the town hall and decided to bake a lemon blueberry pie as my contribution. When I pulled it from the oven, its golden crust smelled like summer. I felt a surge of belonging as neighbors complimented the pie and asked about my renovation. On the morning of Dad's visit, I woke before him and brewed coffee for two. The steam curled between us as he sipped, studying the cabin with a mixture of pride and wonder. He ran his hand along the smooth tabletop I'd restored and commented on the fresh paint job. We spent the day walking the forest trails, talking about old family tales and new ambitions. He admitted he'd been too cautious, too afraid to let me grow. I listened without judgment, grateful for his honesty. That evening we sat by the lake. Marshmallows roasting on the fire pit, and I felt our bond strengthen. As I pack my bags to return to Seattle tomorrow, I glance once more around the cabin. Sunlight filters through linen curtains, illuminating white walls and blue cabinets. A framed photo of us by the dock rests on the mantel. I feel a deep sense of completion. This place is no longer my rebellion, but a shared sanctuary. I know I'll return often, carrying guests and stories. Before locking the door, I inhale cedar-scented air and promise myself, this lake house is where I finally found home.